They are hated in Canada, hated in the United States, hated in England. And now, the only institution still paying close attention to them might be the IRS. You called this. Years ago, before the deals collapsed, before the charity got flagged, before a Spotify executive went on his own podcast and called them what everyone was thinking. You saw it coming. The PR firms didn't. The magazine editors didn't. The streaming executives who wrote those $100 million checks certainly didn't. But you did. So let's talk about what vindication looks like, with receipts. On January 8, 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced via Instagram, not through the palace, not through proper channels, via Instagram, that they intended to step back as senior members of the royal family and become financially independent. The Queen wasn't warned. Prince William wasn't consulted. They quit by social media post, blindsiding an institution that had spent centuries perfecting the art of managed communication. What followed was the Sandringham Summit, the emergency family meeting convened to address the chaos Harry and Meghan had created with their surprise announcement. The couple arrived with demands. They wanted a half-in, half-out arrangement. They wanted to keep their royal titles and their HRH designations. They wanted continued access to the sovereign grant funding. They wanted to retain their royal patronages, including Harry's cherished military appointments. They wanted to use the word royal in their new branding, Sussex Royal. They'd already registered the trademark. They wanted, in essence, to monetize the monarchy while being exempt from its obligations. The Queen said no. Not to everything, but to enough. The half-in, half-out model was rejected as unworkable. The use of royal in commercial branding was denied. Harry's military patronages, Captain General of the Royal Marines, Honorary Air Commandant of RAF Huntington, Commodore-in-Chief of the Royal Naval Command's Small Ships and Diving, were stripped. The message was clear. You cannot trade on the institution while attacking it. You cannot have the privileges without the duties. Harry and Meghan left anyway. They kept the Duke and Duchess titles, a compromise the Queen perhaps now regrets, but lost nearly everything else they'd demanded. At the time, they framed it as liberation, freedom from the constraints of royal life, the opportunity to forge their own path. Here's what that path looked like in practice. September 2, 2020. Netflix deal announced. Estimated value, $100 million. December 15, 2020. Spotify deal announced. Value reported at $20 million. The headlines were breathless. The couple had pulled off the impossible, trading royal constraint for Hollywood gold. They would produce documentaries, feature films, scripted series, podcasts. Content that informs but also gives hope, they said. The money seemed unlimited. The future seemed bright. The Queen's rejection of their half-in, half-out proposal seemed, briefly, like it might have been a miscalculation. And then came the math. In August 2020, before signing those deals, Harry and Meghan purchased their Montecito estate. 18,000 square feet, 9 bedrooms, 16 bathrooms, 7.4 acres of manicured California grounds, tennis court, pool, guest house, children's cottage. The neighbors include Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres, the kind of celebrity enclave where a duke and duchess might feel appropriately situated. Purchase price? $14,650,000. But here's the detail that matters, the one that got buried in the coverage. They didn't pay cash. According to property records examined by real estate journalists, Harry and Meghan took out a mortgage of approximately $14.1 million. They financed nearly the entire purchase. That's not wealth. That's leverage. That's betting everything on deals that haven't delivered yet. The carrying costs on a property like that? Real estate analysts examining comparable Montecito estates estimate between $1 and $2 million annually. Property taxes in California aren't cheap. Insurance on an 18,000 square foot mansion isn't cheap. Maintenance crews, landscaping teams for 7.4 acres in California's climate. Keeping those grounds manicured requires constant attention. Utilities for a house with 16 bathrooms. Then there's security. When Harry and Meghan left their official royal roles, they lost their taxpayer-funded protection from the Metropolitan Police. Harry has been fighting the UK Home Office in court over this ever since, arguing that he cannot safely return to Britain without police protection. In the meantime, private security for a high-profile family of 4 in the United States? Industry estimates start at several $1 million per year. Round-the-clock protection, armed guards, advance teams, vehicle security. The infrastructure required to protect 2 people this famous and this controversial doesn't come cheap. Staff? Archewell hired Mandana Dayani as its first chief operating officer in September 2021. Fortune reported on the hire, a veteran of tech and media industries brought in to professionalize the operation. But a foundation and production company of their stated ambitions requires more than one executive. Communications professionals, legal counsel, development executives, administrative support. Each hire means salary, benefits, office space. The overhead accumulates. Add it up. Mortgage payments on $14 million in debt. $1 to $2 million in annual property costs. Security running into the millions. Staff for multiple organizations. The personal expenses of a duke and duchess accustomed to a very particular standard of living. Private jets, designer wardrobes, the kind of lifestyle that doesn't scale down gracefully. The deals would need to perform. They didn't. For the first 2 years after signing their major deals, Harry and Meghan's production output was thin. 0 completed Netflix projects in 2021. Their Spotify presence went dormant after an initial holiday special featuring the couple and their son Archie. $120 million in announced deals. Precious little to show for it. When content finally arrived, it was mostly content about themselves. December 2022 brought the Netflix documentary series Harry and Meghan. 6 episodes directed by Liz Garbus, heavy on personal narrative, light on evidence of a functioning production pipeline beyond projects starring the Sussexes themselves. It performed well, became Netflix's most-watched documentary premiere that year. But one documentary about your own drama isn't a production company. It's a cash-out. It's selling the only asset you have left, your grievances. On Spotify, Meghan launched Archetypes in August 2022. 12 episodes of the Duchess chatting with celebrities about stereotypes affecting women. Serena Williams, Mariah Carey, Paris Hilton. It debuted at the top of the charts. Critics noted the production values. Fans appreciated the intimate format. 12 episodes. That was it. Nearly 3 years into a multi-year $20 million deal, and she'd produced 1 season of 1 podcast. The deal required productivity benchmarks. They weren't met. On June 15, 2023, the BBC reported that Spotify and Archewell Audio had mutually agreed to part ways. The Archetypes podcast was canceled. The $20 million deal was over, with the couple reportedly not receiving the full headline value of the agreement due to the productivity shortfall. 2 days later, Bill Simmons spoke. Simmons, founder of The Ringer, head of podcast innovation and monetization at Spotify, went on his own show and addressed what had happened. His words would be quoted in The Guardian, The Los Angeles Times, Business Insider, and every subsequent piece about the Sussexes' commercial failures. The fucking grifters, he said. Not a tabloid columnist, not a Twitter troll, a senior Spotify executive speaking on the record about his own company's former partners. A man who had seen their work ethic, or lack of it, from the inside. A Spotify spokesperson did not dispute the remarks. Grifters. The word stuck because it captured something people had sensed but hadn't articulated. The $100 million promises, the minimal output, the sense that celebrity itself was being monetized without any corresponding value being created. Grifters. But the Spotify collapse was just the beginning. Because while their commercial ventures were failing, something quieter was happening with their charity. Something that raises questions the competing videos won't touch. The Archewell Foundation's 2023 Form 990, that's their tax filing, a public document available on their own website, showed total revenue of approximately $1,450,000. Let that sink in. A foundation backed by two globally famous figures who commanded $100 million headlines. A charity that was supposed to drive systemic cultural change across mental health advocacy, gender equity, and community building. A nonprofit that published glossy impact reports highlighting initiatives around online safety for youth. Total annual revenue? $1.45 million. Their Montecito property costs alone likely exceed that. The house costs more to maintain than the entire charity brings in. Charity Watch, the independent charity evaluator, gave the Archewell Foundation a C rating based on examination of its fiscal 2021 audit and tax filing. They noted the foundation spent a significant portion of funds on grants to other organizations rather than directly administering programs, essentially passing money through to other nonprofits rather than doing the work themselves. A legitimate model, perhaps, but one that raises questions about what value the Archewell Foundation actually adds beyond the famous names attached to it. And then came May 2024. On May 13, 2024, news broke that the Archewell Foundation had been declared delinquent by the state of California. The California Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General, had sent a notice dated May 3rd, indicating that the foundation's registration had expired. They'd failed to submit required annual renewal documentation. The implications were immediate. As the Los Angeles Times reported, a charity designated as delinquent may not operate or solicit donations in California until the issue is resolved. The Sussex's flagship charitable organization was legally prohibited from fundraising. The explanation? A lost check. A lost check for a duke and a duchess, with a staff of communications professionals and lawyers and a chief operating officer. A foundation supposedly backed by 9 figures in commercial deals couldn't manage to ensure a regulatory filing reached the correct address. The delinquency was resolved later that same day once the paperwork was properly filed. Charity Watch CEO Lori Styron confirmed to NBC that while it was a compliance failure, it had been addressed. California Governor Gavin Newsom's office pushed back on suggestions of deeper problems, but the pattern was now impossible to ignore. The same couple that couldn't produce enough podcasts to satisfy Spotify couldn't produce enough paperwork to satisfy California regulators. The same organization that raised just $1.45 million in 2023 couldn't file its annual renewal on time. And this is where the questions your comments have been raising for months start to matter. To be clear, no credible source has reported that the Archewell Foundation or Harry and Meghan are under IRS investigation. There is no documentary evidence of any federal tax inquiry. What follows is speculation, questions being raised by observers who've tracked this trajectory closely. But these questions deserve examination. Start with the corporate structure. In January 2022, The Independent and the Daily Mail reported that Harry and Meghan had set up 11 companies in Delaware, Cobblestone Lane, LLC, and a complicated network of related entities. The reporting described it as a complicated structure, multiple interlocking companies, all registered in the same jurisdiction. Why Delaware? Delaware is known as a haven for firms seeking extreme corporate secrecy. The state requires minimal public disclosure of ownership or financial activity. You don't have to reveal who owns a Delaware LLC, You don't have to file public financial statements. The franchise taxes are low. The corporate courts are business-friendly. There are legitimate reasons to incorporate in Delaware. Many Fortune 500 companies do. But there are also reasons that attract people seeking to minimize transparency. 11 companies. For what business purpose? The public filings don't say. That's the point of Delaware. Now consider Harry's residency situation. A British citizen, born in London, sixth in line to the throne, married to an American citizen, living in California since March 2020, with apparent property interests now extending to Portugal as of October 2024. The tax complexity of that arrangement is staggering. The United States taxes based on worldwide income. If Harry qualifies as a U.S. tax resident, and living in California for over 4 years almost certainly triggers the substantial presence test, he owes U.S. taxes on income earned anywhere in the world. The UK also has claims on his income as a British citizen with UK source earnings. The US-UK tax treaty provides some relief from double taxation, but the rules around trusts, inheritances, and foreign corporations are labyrinthine. Harry reportedly received several $million from his late mother, Princess Diana. That inheritance may have been held in trust structures established under UK law. How those trusts are treated under US tax law depends on classification questions that accountants spend entire careers studying. Get it wrong, and the penalties are severe. Then there's the question of their California status. Are they domiciled in California for tax purposes? California has aggressive residency rules and some of the highest state income tax rates in the country. The Portugal property raises additional questions. Are they establishing residence there? For what purpose? Portugal's non-habitual resident regime offered significant tax advantages to qualifying foreign residents, including reduced rates on certain types of income. Add it all up. Multiple countries with potential tax claims, a complicated corporate structure in a secrecy jurisdiction, a nonprofit that couldn't manage basic compliance with state regulators, income streams from entertainment deals that may or may not have triggered various withholding requirements, an inheritance that sits in legal structures created decades ago under different laws. If they can't manage California paperwork, the critics ask, what else might be falling through the cracks? The IRS pays attention to celebrity foundations. They pay attention to complex international tax structures. They pay attention to gaps between reported lifestyle and documented income. They pay attention when nonprofit compliance failures make headlines. No one is saying there's an investigation, but the pattern has become too obvious to ignore. And the commenters who've been raising these questions for months are asking what any reasonable observer would ask. How does the math work? A $14 million mortgage, annual carrying costs of $1 to $2 million, security costs in the millions, staff salaries for multiple organizations, a lifestyle befitting royalty. Against income from deals that have collapsed, a charity that brings in less than the house costs, and commercial value that a Spotify executive summarized in 2 words. Something doesn't add up. And eventually, someone with regulatory authority may want to know why. Speaking of patterns that became obvious, Portugal. In October 2024, news broke that Harry and Meghan had purchased a vacation property in Portugal. Location? The Costa Terra Golf and Ocean Club, an exclusive development in the Comporta region south of Lisbon. The New York Post reported that homes in the development start at approximately $4.7 million. Why Portugal? The official story is family. Princess Eugenie, Harry's cousin, reportedly one of his closest remaining relatives, already owns property in the same development. Friendly faces nearby. A connection to family when most family connections have been severed. The strategic story is different. Portugal has become a magnet for wealthy expatriates seeking tax advantages. The country's non-habitual resident regime, though modified in recent years, offered significant benefits to qualifying foreign residents. The Golden Visa program provided a pathway to European Union residency through real estate investment. For someone whose American commercial ventures are collapsing, whose charity operates on a shoestring, whose public standing has cratered on 3 continents, a European foothold offers options. Proximity to the United Kingdom without being in the United Kingdom. Access to the EU. A jurisdiction with historically favorable treatment of wealthy foreigners. Distance from California's aggressive tax authorities. Distance from the American media market that has soured on them. It looks like what it is, an escape route. They're positioning backup options because somewhere, behind the PR statements and the carefully managed appearances, they know what's coming. And what about going home? Let's be specific about the 3-country rejection. Canada came first. After announcing their departure from royal duties in January 8, 2020, Harry and Meghan landed on Vancouver Island. They stayed briefly, a matter of weeks. Canadians had questions. Who would pay for their security? Would taxpayers be expected to fund protection for non-working royals who had chosen to leave their duties? The welcome cooled quickly. By March, they were gone, fleeing to California as the pandemic began, settling initially in Tyler Perry's Beverly Hills mansion. The United States was supposed to be different. Hollywood, Netflix, Spotify. The promise of reinvention on their own terms. By 2024, American favorability polling told a different story. The couple who once commanded magazine covers and fawning profiles had become punchlines. The grifters label stuck. The productivity failures stuck. The sense that they'd promised everything and delivered nothing, that stuck too. Vanity Fair might still put them on covers, but the tone had shifted from celebration to clinical examination. And England. The place Harry grew up. The family he left behind. The institution he attacked while keeping the titles it gave him. That hypocrisy deserves its own moment. They savaged the monarchy. They sat with Oprah and made allegations that shook the institution to its core. Racism in discussions about their son's skin color. Callousness about mental health struggles. A family that refused to help. The interview was unforgettable and unforgivable. Ask anyone who watched the Queen sit alone at Prince Philip's funeral. COVID restrictions limiting mourners, while her grandson monetized family grievances for a streaming audience. And yet, they kept the titles. Duke and Duchess of Sussex, still trading on royal prestige while attacking the source of it. Still using Sussex as a brand while condemning the institution that granted it. The Queen denied them royal in their commercial branding, but let them keep the hereditary dignity. How can they be trusted when the fundamental transaction of their public life is built on that contradiction? They wanted the half-in, half-out arrangement. They were denied. So they chose fully out, except for the parts that benefit them. The titles stay. The connection to royalty that makes them commercially interesting stays. Only the duties and the loyalty were discarded. British polling has been brutal. Public sentiment has shifted decisively against them. The media coverage is no longer curious or sympathetic. It's contemptuous. The country they fled doesn't want them back. 3 countries, 0 goodwill left. And then there's Catherine. The audience is protective of her, fiercely so. Every perceived slight, every attack, every instance where Harry and Meghan undermined or hurt the Princess of Wales, it registers, it compounds, it doesn't get forgotten. The crying incident. During the lead-up to Harry and Meghan's wedding in 2018, reports emerged about a confrontation over flower girl dresses. Initial tabloid coverage claimed Meghan made Catherine cry. In the Oprah interview, Meghan offered a counter-narrative, claiming it was actually Catherine who made her cry, followed by an apology and flowers. The truth remains disputed. What's not disputed? Meghan chose to discuss it on global television, relitigating private family moments for an audience of millions. Whatever happened behind closed doors became content, became ammunition. became another line item in the monetization of family dysfunction. Then there's the timing. Catherine announced her cancer diagnosis in March 2024, a private health crisis made public only because speculation had become unbearable. The months that followed required privacy, treatment, recovery, the kind of dignified silence that allows healing. The Sussexes' various media ventures continued regardless. The contrast between Catherine's grace under unimaginable pressure and the Sussexes' relentless content machine wasn't lost on anyone watching. Harry's book Spare included mentions of Catherine that many readers found gratuitous. Private moments weaponized for book sales. Family conversations offered up for public consumption. The sense that nothing is off limits, that family relationships are simply content to be monetized, has calcified into something close to moral verdict. And then there's the online dimension, the one that rarely gets discussed in mainstream coverage. The Sussex Squad, as Harry and Meghan's most devoted online supporters style themselves, has conducted years of coordinated campaigns against Catherine and the royal family. Hashtag campaigns, targeted harassment, the spreading of conspiracy theories during Catherine's health absence. Reports have documented patterns of coordinated, inauthentic behavior, accounts that appear, amplify negative narratives about the Waleses, and disappear. Harry and Meghan have never meaningfully distanced themselves from this activity. No public statement condemning the harassment. No request that their supporters cease. Their silence has been noted. It has been interpreted, and it has contributed to the public turning against them with a finality that no PR rehabilitation can reverse. The audience sees villains. They see Harry as the fool, controlled, emasculated, pitiable in his weakness, unable or unwilling to recognize what has happened to him. They see Meghan as the architect, calculating, manipulative, the one making the decisions that Harry is too compromised to question. Whether that characterization is fair matters less than the fact that it's now fixed. Millions of people have reached their conclusion. No PR firm can undo it. No rebrand can make them forget. No strategic interview can rebuild what's been systematically demolished. You predicted this. Before they even landed in Canada, before the deals were signed, before the Oprah interview aired, you saw what was coming. You recognized something that the entertainment executives missed, that the legacy media glossed over, that the palace itself failed to adequately address. You saw that this wasn't a strategic exit. It was a slow-motion collapse dressed up as liberation. And now, the receipts are in. A $100 million Netflix deal that's produced one documentary about themselves. A $20 million Spotify deal terminated early for lack of productivity, with a senior executive calling them grifters on a public podcast. A charity that brings in less annually than their house costs to maintain. A delinquency notice from California regulators because someone couldn't manage to mail a check to the right address. 11 companies in Delaware, structured for secrecy. A property in Portugal, positioned for escape. Questions being raised about how the math works and whether anyone with regulatory authority is paying attention. The soft language stops here. They're not running out of runway. They're not facing challenges. They're not navigating a transition. They're broke, leveraged to the hilt on a $14 million mortgage, bleeding money on property costs and security and staff, with commercial value that's collapsed and a charity that can't get out of its own way. Remember what they demanded at the Sandringham Summit? The half-in, half-out arrangement, the royal branding, the military patronages, the continued access to institutional support while pursuing commercial freedom. They wanted everything. They got titles, just titles. And now even those feel like albatrosses, constant reminders of what they gave up, what they attacked, what they can never get back. Their remaining choices? Portugal, maybe. A country with favorable tax treatment and distance from the wreckage. England won't have them back, not meaningfully, not in any way that matters. The institutions they attacked, the family they wounded, the grandmother Harry lost while he was too busy monetizing grievances to make peace. There's no reconciliation that wouldn't be seen as cynical, as another transaction, as the latest pivot in a decade of pivots. Canada learned its lesson in a matter of weeks. America is learning it now, one collapse deal at a time. The IRS angle that the other videos wouldn't touch? The commenters who've been raising it for months are asking the right questions. No confirmed investigation, but a pattern so obvious that if attention isn't being paid, it probably should be. You called this years ago. You didn't need PR firms or polls or industry analysis. You saw the pattern when others were still being charmed. You recognized the type. You predicted the trajectory when the smart money was still betting on their success. The verdict is in. The collapse you predicted has arrived. And the only thing left to watch is how long they can keep the performance going before even they have to admit what everyone else already knows. Subscribe for more stories like this.